And that day was likewise very famous in the history of chivalry, for in the afternoon the famous Round Table was established, and that Round Table was at once the very flower and the chiefest glory of King Arthur's reign. For about mid of the afternoon the king and queen, preceded by Merlin, and followed by all that splendid court of kings, lords, nobles, and knights in full array, made progression to that place where Merlin, partly by magic and partly by skill, had caused to be builded a very wonderful pavilion above the Round Table where it stood. And when the king and the queen and the court had entered in thereat, they were amazed at the beauty of that pavilion, for they perceived, as it were, a great space that appeared to be a marvellous land of fay. For the walls were all richly gilded, and were painted with various wonderful figures of saints and of angels, clad in ultramarine and crimson, and all those saints and angels were depicted playing upon various musical instruments that appeared to be made of gold. And overhead, the roof of the pavilion was made to represent the sky, being all of cerulean blue, sprinkled over with stars. And in the midst of that painted sky was an image, as it were, of the sun in his glory. And underfoot was a pavement all of marble stone, set in squares of black and white, and blue and red, and sundry other colours. In the midst of the pavilion was a round table, with seats thereat, exactly sufficient for 50 persons, and at each of the 50 places was a chalice of gold, filled with fragrant wine, and at each place was a paten of gold, bearing a manchet of fair white bread. And when the king and the court entered into the pavilion, lo, music began of a sudden fall to play with a wonderful sweetness. Then Merlin came and took King Arthur by the hand, and led him away from Queen Guinevere. And he said unto the king, Lo, this is the Round Table. And King Arthur said, Merlin, that which I see is wonderful beyond a telling. After that Merlin discovered unto the king the various marvels of the Round Table. For first he pointed to a high seat, very wonderfully wrought in precious woods, and gilded so that it was exceedingly beautiful, and he said, Behold, Lord King, yonder seat is hight the seat royal, and that seat is thine for to sit in. And as Merlin spake, lo, there suddenly appeared sundry letters of gold upon the back of that seat, and the letters of gold read the name, Arthur, King. And Merlin said, Lord, yonder seat may well be called the centre seat of the Round Table, for in sooth thou art indeed the very centre of all that is most worthy of true knightliness. Wherefore that seat shall be called the centre seat of all the other seats. Then Merlin pointed to that seat that stood opposite to the seat royal, and that seat also was of a very wonderful appearance, as aforetold in this history. And Merlin said unto the king, My lord king, that seat is called the seat perilous, for no man but one in all this world shall sit therein, and that man is not yet born upon the earth. And if any other man shall dare to sit therein, that man shall either suffer death or a sudden and terrible misfortune for his temerity. Wherefore that seat is called the seat perilous. Merlin, quoth the king, all that thou tellest me passeth the bound of understanding for marvellousness. Now I do beseech thee in all haste, for to find forthwith a sufficient number of knights to fill this Round Table, so that my glory shall be entirely complete. Then Merlin smiled upon the king, though not with cheerfulness, and said, Lord, why art thou in such haste? Know that when this round table shall be entirely filled in all its seats, then shall thy glory be entirely achieved, and then forthwith shall thy day begin for to decline. For when any man hath reached the crowning of his glory, then his work is done, and God breaketh him, as a man might break a chalice, from which such perfect quoth, being drunk, that no baser wine may be allowed to defile it. So when thy work is done and ended, shall God shatter the chalice of thy life. Then did the king look very steadfastly unto Merlin's face, and said, Old man, that which thou sayest is ever of great wonder, for thou speakest words of wisdom. Nevertheless, seeing that I am in God's hands, I do wish for my glory and for his good will to be accomplished, even though he shall then entirely break me when I have served his purposes. Lord, said Merlin, thou speakest like a worthy king, and with a very large and noble heart. Nevertheless, I may not fill the round table for thee at this time, for, though thou hast gathered about thee the very noblest court of chivalry and all of Christendom, yet are there but 32 knights here present who may be considered worthy to sit at the round table. Then Merlin, quoth King Arthur, I do desire of thee that thou shalt straightway choose me those 32. So will I do, Lord King, said Merlin. Then Merlin cast his eyes around, and lo, he saw where King Pellinore stood at a little distance. Unto him went Merlin, and took him by the hand. Behold, my lord king, quoth he, here is the knight in all the world next to thyself, who at this time is most worthy for to sit at this round table. For he is both exceedingly gentle of demeanour unto the poor and needy, and at the same time is so terribly strong and skilful that I know not whether thou or he is the more to be feared in an encounter of knight against knight. Then Merlin led King Pellinore forward, and behold, upon the high seat that stood upon the left hand of the royal seat, there appeared of a sudden the name Pellinore. And the name was emblazoned in letters of gold that shone with extraordinary lustre. And when King Pellinore took his seat, great and loud acclaim long continued was given him by all those who stood round about. Then after that, Merlin had thus chosen King Arthur and King Pellinore. He chose out of the court of King Arthur the following knights 32 in all, and these were the knights of great renown and chivalry, who did first establish that round table, wherefore they were surnamed the ancient and honourable companions of the round table. To begin with, there was Sir Gawain and Sir Owain. But that's a story for another time.